When I first met Claire, it wasn't under dramatic circumstances or some cinematic coincidence. It was ordinary, almost painfully so. A friend had dragged me to a mutual acquaintance's birthday dinner, and there she was, sitting across from me, laughing at a joke I didn't hear. What I did hear was the way her laughter seemed to ripple through the table, pulling people toward her like a magnet. She had that kind of presence, the kind that didn't demand attention but captured it all the same. In those early months, everything felt simple. We talked endlessly, trading stories of childhood, half-formed dreams, and quiet fears that we wouldn't admit to anyone else. She wanted to travel, to see the world before settling down. I wanted stability, a home filled with warmth. Somehow, those two desires didn't clash, they balanced. I imagined us weaving them together. I'd be the anchor, and she'd be the sail. 2 years into our relationship, I proposed. Nothing extravagant, just the two of us at a quiet park we often walked through after dinner. She cried, she said yes, and in that moment, I thought I'd found the kind of happiness that people spend a lifetime chasing. For a while, I lived inside that bliss. We began planning guest lists, venues, food tastings, the works. She threw herself into the details with enthusiasm that only reinforced my belief that this was right. I watched her pore over flower arrangements with the same seriousness I used at work, and it made me love her even more. But then, slowly, something shifted. At first, it was small, postponing dress appointments, brushing off conversations about dates. I told myself it was stress. Weddings are overwhelming, maybe she just needed space. Still, her enthusiasm dulled, like a flame fighting for oxygen. One night, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I noticed she was staring at her food, barely touching it. I asked if something was wrong, expecting maybe she'd complain about her workload or a fight with her sister. Instead, she looked up at me with eyes that seemed heavier than I'd ever seen and said, "I don't think I'm ready." The words hung between us, stark and final. My first instinct was disbelief. This was the same woman who had once been giddy about color palettes and playlists. I asked what she meant, my voice steadier than I felt. "I love you," she said, "but marriage, commitment on that level, it scares me. I'm not sure I can give that right now." It was a strange contradiction. She claimed love but hesitated at the very thing we'd been building toward. I searched her face, desperate for clarity, for reassurance that this was temporary. She must have seen the confusion there, because she reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "I need time," she whispered. "Just wait for me." Wait. The word echoed in my head long after she said it. It wasn't a refusal, but it wasn't acceptance either. It was a request to put my life on hold, to suspend the future I'd been carefully constructing with her. I smiled, or at least I tried to. In that moment, I didn't know what else to do. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think that this hesitation was just fear, something she could overcome. Another part of me, quieter but insistent, wondered if this was the beginning of an unraveling I couldn't stop. That night, lying in bed next to her, I stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathing settle into sleep. My mind, however, refused to rest. I replayed our years together, searching for signs I might have missed. Had she always been unsure? Was her yes at the park more of a reflex than conviction? I wanted answers, but all I had was her request, to wait. And though my heart was uneasy, I nodded silently in the dark, not realizing then how much that single word would come to define the days ahead. At first, I convinced myself that her hesitation was normal. People get cold feet all the time, right? A wedding is a massive step, and maybe Claire just needed space to breathe. I told myself patience was love in its truest form. If she needed time, I would give it. That was what a good partner did. But patience has a strange way of breeding doubt when the silence stretches too long. In the weeks that followed her confession, I noticed changes that I couldn't ignore. She started staying late at work more often, her excuses always vague. When I'd ask how her day went, she'd smile, too quickly, too rehearsed, and give answers that felt thinner than paper. Oh, the usual, just busy, nothing worth mentioning. It was such a sharp contrast from the woman who once couldn't wait to tell me about every detail of her day, from a difficult client to the funny thing her coworker said at lunch. That openness was gone, replaced by walls I didn't remember helping her build. Friends began to notice, too. At a small get-together, one of my oldest buddies pulled me aside. "She seems distant," he said carefully, as though testing the waters. "You okay?" I brushed it off with a laugh, but his words stuck. Distant. Yes. That was exactly it. She was there physically, but something about her was elsewhere, untouchable. I didn't want to become paranoid, but the human mind has a way of connecting dots even when you try to ignore the picture they form. She started keeping her phone closer, flipping it face down on the table. When a notification buzzed, she'd glance at it with a sharpness I hadn't seen before, then slide it into her pocket like it was contraband. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the nightstand. A message preview flashed across the screen, just a first name I didn't recognize, followed by a heart emoji. I froze. My hand hovered above the device, my pulse thundering in my ears. I didn't open it. I wanted to. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to unlock that phone and drag the truth into the light. But I didn't. Why? Pride, maybe. Or fear. Because if I saw something I couldn't unsee, there would be no going back. Instead, I waited. I observed. Quietly, carefully. Her patterns grew stranger. She started making weekend plans that didn't involve me, claiming she needed time to think. When I asked if she wanted me to come along, she would smile in that distracted way and say, "Not this time. Soon, soon, wait, time." These words became her shield, and I, too hopeful, too stubborn, let them pierce me over and over. One evening, after she said she was working late, I decided to drive by her office. I told myself it wasn't spying, that I just wanted to surprise her with coffee. But when I parked across the street, the building was already dark, the lot empty. No Claire. I sat there in my car, the coffee growing cold in my hands, and felt a hollow form in my chest. I didn't want to believe it, but belief no longer mattered. Reality was pressing in, sharp and unrelenting. That night, she came home hours later, flushed and smiling in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She carried the scent of perfume I didn't recognize, faint but undeniable. I asked how work had been, and she gave the same tired smile, the same hollow answer. For the first time, I didn't smile back. Lying in bed, I stared at her as she slept, her face peaceful, almost innocent. I thought about the life we'd been building, the vows we'd never speak, the trust that felt like it was slipping through my fingers grain by grain. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. But something inside me shifted that night. The blind faith I had wrapped myself in began to tear. I knew the truth was out there, just beyond the curtain she had drawn between us. And I knew that soon, I would pull it back, no matter what I found waiting. For now, I waited in silence. But my patience was no longer born from love. It was preparation. The night it all came crashing down didn't begin with suspicion. It began with a strange calm, the kind that settles before a storm you don't yet see forming. Claire had told me she was going out with friends from work, just a casual dinner, nothing special. Her tone was light, her smile effortless, almost rehearsed. I nodded, pretending to believe her. By then, my doubts had sharpened into something close to certainty. The darkness between us was no longer subtle, it was a presence that filled every room we shared. Still, I hadn't had proof. Proof mattered. Proof was what separated paranoia from truth. That evening, after she left, I sat in the silence of our apartment, the ticking clock almost mocking. My chest felt tight, as if it already knew what my mind refused to admit. Eventually, I decided I couldn't sit still anymore. Something inside me snapped. The waiting, the smiling, the pretending. It all fractured in one decisive moment. I grabbed my keys and drove. Not toward her office, not toward home, but toward a restaurant she had once mentioned offhandedly, a place she said her team liked to visit after long days. I told myself it was a shot in the dark, but when I pulled into the lot, her car was already there. Through the wide windows, I spotted her instantly. She wasn't alone. She sat across from a man I had never seen before, her body angled toward him in a way that spoke volumes. The easy laughter, the way her hand lingered just a little too long on his wrist, it was everything I hadn't seen from her in months, all given freely to someone else. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles white, breath shallow. I'd thought about this possibility so many times, but the reality cut deeper than any imagination could. I could have stormed inside. I could have caused a scene. But instead, I waited. I watched. I memorized every detail, because I knew she could deny words, but she could never deny actions. When she finally came home that night, I was waiting in the living room. She froze at the door, surprised to find me awake. "Hey," she said lightly, too lightly. "I thought you'd be asleep. Dinner run late?" I asked, my voice calm, calmer than I felt. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. "Yeah, work stories, you know how it is." I let the silence stretch before speaking again. "Funny, I didn't know work stories involved holding another man's hand." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally whispered, "You followed me." "No," I said, standing now, the weight of the truth settling in my bones. "I saw you. That's different." The excuses came fast, a flood I'd half expected. It wasn't what it looked like. "He's just a friend." I was confused. "I didn't want to hurt you." I raised a hand, cutting her off. "Stop." She did. For the first time in weeks, she was silent. In that silence, I felt the storm inside me: rage, anger, heartbreak, betrayal. But beneath it all, there was something stronger: clarity. She hadn't been unsure about marriage. She hadn't needed time. She had already chosen. Just not me. "You asked me to wait," I said softly, almost to myself. "Wait for what?" "For you to decide if I was worth it. For you to finish testing your options." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel moved. Not anymore. I'd shed enough for both of us in the sleepless nights leading to this moment. Finally, I smiled. It wasn't joy, but it wasn't bitterness either. It was release. "You don't have to explain," I told her. "Because I understand now. You weren't afraid of commitment, you were afraid of committing to me. And that's something I can't change." Her lips parted, searching for words, but none came. I picked up my keys from the table and walked toward the door. "I won't wait anymore," I said quietly, the final nail in the coffin of our story. And without slamming, without shouting, without one last glance back, I left. The first few days after I walked out were a blur. Silence followed me everywhere, into the car, into my apartment, even into my dreams. For so long, Claire had been woven into every corner of my life. Her laughter lingered in my memory, her voice echoed in familiar places. At first, that absence felt unbearable, like I had cut out a piece of myself and left it behind. But grief has a strange rhythm. It doesn't remain sharp forever. Slowly, the ache dulled, and in its place, something steadier began to take root. Relief. I hadn't realized how much weight I'd been carrying until it was gone. The constant second-guessing, the excuses, the way I twisted myself into knots just to maintain the illusion of us. Without her, there was pain, yes, but there was also peace. Peace in knowing I no longer had to question every late night or half-truth. Peace in finally seeing the situation for what it was. My friends noticed the difference before I did. One night, sitting around a fire pit in a friend's backyard, someone said, "You look lighter, man." At first, I laughed, but then I realized they were right. For months, I'd been shrinking, dimming myself to keep her comfortable. Now, I was standing straighter, breathing deeper, living again. That wasn't to say it was easy. Healing rarely is. There were nights when loneliness clawed at me, when memories of what could have been haunted me more than what actually was. But even in those moments, I reminded myself, I hadn't lost her. I'd let go of someone who was never truly mine. And that made all the difference. I began to rediscover parts of myself I'd abandoned. I picked up old hobbies, photography, hiking, things I'd set aside to fit into her world. I poured more energy into my career, taking risks I'd once avoided. Each small step forward became proof that I was more than the heartbreak she left behind. Most importantly, I learned a lesson I'll never forget: commitment isn't something you beg for. It isn't something you wait around hoping someone will hand you. Real commitment is mutual. It's a choice two people make every day, without hesitation, without conditions. Anything less isn't love, it's a delay of the inevitable. Claire reached out a few times afterward, texts, a voicemail or two. Apologies, explanations, fragments of regret. I didn't answer, not because I wanted revenge or to punish her, but because I finally understood she had no power over me anymore. The closure I needed didn't come from her words. It came from my decision to walk away. Sometimes people imagine strength as loud, yelling, slamming doors, burning bridges. But I learned strength can also be quiet. It's choosing dignity when betrayal invites chaos. It's leaving calmly when your whole body screams to stay and fight. It's smiling, not because you're unhurt, but because you've decided not to let the hurt define you. In time, the anger faded. The betrayal stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a lesson. Claire had taken my trust, yes, but in the process, she had also shown me what I deserved. And what I deserved was honesty, loyalty, and a love that didn't ask me to wait while it wandered elsewhere. Looking back, I don't see myself as a victim of her choices. I see myself as someone who was tested, someone who walked through fire and came out tempered, stronger than before. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone listening, it's this: never beg someone to choose you. Never put your life on hold while they decide if you're worth it. Your worth isn't a question to be answered, it's a truth to be lived. I waited once. I won't wait again. And in that decision, I found freedom.